There are several various species of ruminant animals present all over the world. They are hoofed mammals that have a unique digestive system. Cattle, horses, goats, buffalo, deer, elk, giraffes, and camels are examples of ruminants. Any of these species has a digestive mechanism that is distinct from our own, as they have four compartments for the stomach instead of one. Ruminant animals do not completely chew the grass or vegetation they eat. The partially chewed grass goes into the large rumen where it is stored and broken down into balls of cud. When the animal has had its share of food, it will sit and chew its cud. The cud is then eaten again and will pass through a reticulum, the OMASUM, and the chewed stomach, the abomasum. Ruminant animals are mammals that belong to the order Artiodactyla and have a valuable role in sustainable agricultural system and provision of food to human beings. To learn more about ruminants, take a look at these videos and tell us later what you have learned with us.
Cattle are the most important livestock species globally and in the United States in terms of both the value and weight of their products. In fact, cattle are ruminants. In terms of nomenclature, we call an adult female who has had at least one calf a cow, an adult male a bull, in the process of giving birth as calving. To learn more about cattle and their management, these are the topics that will be presented. Number 1. Management of cattle breeding stock. Number 2. Management of breeding bull. And number 3. Management of breeding cow.
Good breeding management. Good breeding management starts at several months before the bulls are turned in with the cows. Proper development of young bulls and replacement heifers and proper nutrition of cows from 6 weeks prior to calving and continuing through the breeding season are necessary to ensure early estrus and high conception rate.
These are the common management practices in cattle.
Bulls are a tremendous investment for cattle producers. When making considerations about your bull battery, winter preparedness is essential. Between nutritional needs, cold weather management, and prepping for the following breeding season, there's a lot to manage when it comes to keeping your bulls in optimal breeding condition during the winter months.
Yeah, so when we think about bulls in our bull battery, the first thing that comes to mind is making sure that these guys are ready for the breeding season, and then not forgetting about these guys at the end of the breeding season. So when you look at some survey data across the U.S., roughly 87 to 90% of operations utilize bulls as natural service breeding. And so these guys are a large investment for operations and for producers. And so we need to make sure that these guys are ready to breed, so they are satisfactory breeders in terms of our breeding soundness exams. They're in a good condition moving into and out of the breeding season. And then these guys can cover a lot of ground and be able to cover a lot of females depending on the bull to cow ratio that we're thinking about for our breeding season and operations.
Weight loss for bulls during the breeding season is inevitable. Furthermore, if you're dealing with bulls that haven't reached full maturity, you may discover they will lose a higher amount of weight by the end of the breeding season.
Bulls can lose anywhere from 100 to 200 pounds, if not more. And a lot of that depends on the age of those bulls, workload. And so when we think about our bull to cow ratios, usually we try and target a 1 to 25 bull to cow ratio. But these bulls are having to cover a lot of ground, so there's increased activity. These guys are working. This is their kind of, on season. Off season is a little different. When these bulls are during breeding season, these guys need to be able to cover some ground, cover females. And so they're working hard. And so we see our younger bulls that they might be losing more weight during the breeding season than some of our mature bulls, but we do lose 1 to 2 body condition on those bulls during the working season.
Just as you would want to maintain the body condition score of your cow herd, maintaining a healthy BCS in your bulls into and throughout the winter will have a great impact on their reproductive prowess.
So when we think about body condition of our bulls through the breeding season, we usually try and target anywhere from a 5 to a 6. Now, if those bulls have lost condition, we need to make sure that we can get that weight back on those bulls prior to that next breeding season. These bulls need to gain some weight, then we can look at how we're feeding them over that winter time point to get them back up into an adequate condition of 5 or 6. And so when we think about monitoring condition, a big part of why we want to do that is make sure that these bulls, if they're losing some of that energy during the winter due to cold, they can maintain that body weight for an extended period of time. They're not having to use a lot of energy prior to that breeding season. When we think about condition, heavier bulls, there can be impacts on fertility and semen production, and so being able to keep them in that moderate condition will be important.
When it comes to maintaining a suitable body condition score for your bulls, the biggest concern you should take into account are nutritional needs and cold weather management.
When we evaluate those bulls coming out of the breeding season, they might have lost some weight. And so ultimately, if we can take a look at what forage resources we have, where these bulls are going, so are they going back in a pen? Do we have pasture for these bulls to winter in? And so then we can gauge what forage resources we have available, maybe if it is in the pasture, or if maybe we need to supplement a hay, or if those bulls maybe lost quite a bit of weight, maybe are a little thinner, or some of our younger bulls, this is a great opportunity to add an energy and protein source such as a distillers, or maybe doing a mixed ration with some silage and hay.
Building these young, newly weaned bulls into the massive specimens needed to perform in a commercial or purebred cow herd takes a lot of care, patience, and just plain cow sense. We traveled to central Georgia to Three Trees Ranch to get the word from some cattlemen who get it done every day to learn about the nutrition and management required for effective bull development. getting the calves off to a good, healthy start is critical.
Never in a calf's life will they be under more stress than they are at weaning, for several reasons. They're losing their mother. They're commingled with calves that they've never seen before. A lot of times there's a diet change. A lot of times, most times, there's a disease stress, a disease challenge, or a sickness challenge they have to overcome. They go through the processing when they come in. It's just extremely stressful on the calves, and the most important thing we can do is get these cattle to eat as soon as possible. And that's what the Impact Starter does. It's very, very palatable, it's very energy dense, and it gets them started. These cattle will never, ever get over a bad start. That's why the weaning phase is so critical.
Having the correct pen set up can make all the difference.
And these calves, when you wean them, they're going to walk the fence and bawl and holler for their mother for 48 to 72 hours. And you just need to place these feeders in high traffic areas. Make them walk by them, make them smell the feed, make them want to eat. And that's the only way they're going to get started right. Make sure they have clean, fresh water available at all times. And just make sure that they have to pass this feed, that they have to know it's there. They will go to eating it, and it will get them over the stress.
Once these calves know how to eat and have been on the starting program for 21 to 28 days, it's time to see what they can do from a gain performance standpoint. The bulls are tested for their ability to grow quickly and efficiently while staying structurally and metabolically sound.
Another reason we are truly pleased with the PERONO IM technology program is we scan these bulls when they're yearlings. Every bull on the place gets scanned for ribeye area, intermuscular fat, and rump fat. And as I mentioned before, we believe the genetic potential of these cattle that we're making here at Three Trees is very high. And when we go to scan these cattle, we believe that they have reached that genetic potential, whether it be in a large ribeye with adequate intermuscular fat, adequate rump fat, and it's because of the IM technology and the way we feed these cattle through the PERONO program.
The correct ration is critical, such as AccuRation cattle limiters and forage, or Impact Beef Grower as a complete diet. Along with good feeding and pen management, it can make the difference.
You don't want moisture and molded feed to build up in your feed trays. They have to be cleaned. You have to have somebody checking these feeders every day. And when the guys are in here going through the bulls, they ride by the feeders and check the feeders and make sure we have fresh feed in the trays. Because if the cattle are not eating this feed, it's certainly not doing them any good, and we're wasting our money. And we want to set the gates in the feeders to a 2-inch space so it has free flow, but it's not overflow till the feed builds up and molds and gets stale. I'm one that believes that cattle are supposed to get out and travel. You certainly don't want them to have less than about 150 square foot per head. And in the growth phase, you don't really want to go over 450 to 500 square feet per head. When these bulls come off of the growth phase, we like to turn them out in bigger pastures with a lot of forage, and they'll eat a lot of forage and not a whole lot of feed, and they can travel and they stay sound and their feet harden up, and they learn how to travel, they learn how to go forage and find feed. So when you get him and you turn your bull out, he knows how to eat and he knows how to survive.
Daily, frequent observation of the bulls assures they're healthy and gaining. At the same time, it goes a long way in positively affecting the ultimate disposition of the bulls. That's a behavior trait that's extremely important to the cowman who'll be using the finished product.
I don't want to sell you a bull and you turn him out and the first thing he does is goes bust through the fence. That's not a very good customer. You won't come back. We want to sell you a bull again. And we believe that good disposition cattle are the best selling point we have here. And the way we feed them on the AccuRation products and the PERONO intake modifying technology also helps us in the disposition of these cattle, because they don't have to wait on the feed truck to come by, fight for bunk space and get what they can. They go to the feed bunk as they please, eat a small meal several times a day, go back, lay down, water, do whatever they want to do, but they don't have to fight for bunk space, and that carries over in their everyday routine.
Once the bulls come off the gain test, they're maintained primarily on a forage diet with some supplement to harden them up, so they'll be range ready when they're turned out with the cow herd.
We try to group the bulls when they come over by sire groups and the age group. We don't want to put yearling bulls with older bulls. And if you keep the different sire groups together during the sale, it makes it makes the customers happy when you sell them all in different sire groups. Well, we try to distance the feeders away from each other. We got the hay feeder good ways from the feeder itself and also from the water. We want the bulls to travel, get some exercise so they can be range ready to, they won't melt when you get them home.
The final test is customer satisfaction. You may be your own customer.
So one thing we think about this time of year is that the breeding season is going to be coming up. For those late winter calving operations, we'll be turning bulls out typically sometime into March or April. And when we talk about a traditional spring calving operation, we'll be turning bulls out sometime in May generally. There's some things we want to make sure we do prior to and during the breeding season to increase our odds of success. So prior to the breeding season, we want to make sure we have bulls in appropriate condition. We want those bulls in a body condition score of 5 or 6. If they're too fat or too thin, that can hurt fertility. We want to make sure we work with a large animal veterinarian to make sure we have those bulls on a good vaccination program. Also that we treat them for internal and external parasites. And then typically 4 to 8 weeks before the start of the breeding season, you may want to consider having a breeding soundness exam done, where that vet's going to collect a semen sample and check it for morphology and motility. Also, the vet's going to check other reproductive organs to make sure that bull can be a satisfactory potential breeder. However, even though that bull passes that breeding soundness exam, we want to monitor him during the breeding season to make sure he's checking cows, his libido's good. We also want to make sure that he's able to mount those cows and breed normally. And if he's not, then we want to obviously take actions. Also, we want to monitor those cows and see if anybody, once they get bred, if they come back into heat 21 days later, because if we have a large percentage of cows coming back into heat, that's an indication we may have a problem. Or if at the end of the breeding season we see quite a few cows that come or that are in heat, that's an indication that we may have some fertility issues with those bulls. And so we want to make sure prior to the breeding season we follow the appropriate management steps, as well as during the breeding season we pay attention so that we can ensure a high pregnancy rates in those cows.
Just like anyone who starts a business, testing the waters is important. Julissa Agribusiness Corporation started with a few heads hanggang sa makakita ito ng potential sa cattle farming.
Yeah, my boss started this at the year 1984 with 3 heads, and then pinapakain niya yung parang backyard. It so happened na nakita niya there is a potential business in cattle industry. So since 1984, from 3 heads, it have an additional of another 50 heads, then additional of 100 heads, and then so gumaganda yung takbo ng patining. So he invest more on additional number of heads for breeding and patining.
It's been 30 years since the establishment of this business at nakakita ng malaking potential ang Julissa Agribusiness Corporation sa ganitong negosyo dahil sa malaking average daily gain na naidudulot nito.
Since 1984 up to at present, that is 2014, is the numbers of year. But this area was started since 1994. Nakita ng boss ko na may potential siya in fattening in the sense because of the tinatawag na EDG, yung average daily gain is medyo maganda. I-convert natin into pesos, medyo may profit in the end.
Part of the development in the cattle industry is going from cattle grazing to cattle confinement. At napatunayan ng Julissa Agribusiness Corporation ang efficiency ng cattle confinement.
If we compare the efficiency of the range cattle and confinement cattle is have a big difference. Because in the range cattle, the supervision is wide and we cannot see how the cattle perform. But in confinement breeding, the close supervision of the management is properly done.
the previous video, we have introduced the management of a breeding bull. In this portion, we will now talk and learn about the management of a breeding heifer or cow. First off, let's start with the basics. What is a cow and what is a heifer?
By definition, a cow is a female ruminant that is already being used for breeding, while a heifer is that which has not been used at all. Like the bull, the cow must be adequately fed with good quality feed, water in a barn or house. Cows used for breeding are often kept together but separated as the need arises for mating. They must be allowed a lot of exercise and allowed to graze with the bull to stimulate or help detect the heat period, which is the period that the female animals are very receptive to their male counterpart.
The heat period of the cow lasts for about 17 hours and it repeats itself every 21 days, except if pregnant. In cows, there's a term that describes a series of events with changes that can be seen in the ovary, in the uterus, in the behavior of the cow, and the hormones that are in the blood of the cow. It is called the estrous cycle.
In summary, it is called the estrous cycle because it goes from one time when the cow shows standing heat, also called estrus, until the next time she shows estrus, approximately 21 days later. 28 hours after the cow shows standing heat, the ovaries demonstrate one of the most dramatic events of the estrous cycle.
Ovulation. Ovulation is when the follicle ruptures, releasing the egg into the oviduct to be fertilized. The cells that remain from the ruptured follicle become a new structure on the ovary called corpus luteum. If the cow does not become pregnant, the estrous cycle will culminate in regression of the corpus luteum and a new estrus about 21 days later.
There are a lot of signs to distinguish when a cow is in heat. It becomes restless, moves and mounts on one another. The external part of the vulva becomes swollen. It stands and allows the male to ride or attempt to ride other females. The moment the cow is detected to be on heat, mating must be carried out at about 12 hours after to ensure a good conception rate. Detection of heat is now computerized in some dairy farms in developed countries.
Meanwhile, a young female ruminant called heifer comes at the first heat at about 1 year of age. At this point, they must not be used for mating. However, a heifer is ready for breeding from 18 to 21 months of age, and it can have its first calving at about 30 to 36 months of age.
Now let's proceed to the different mating systems. Cohabitation between male and female is called mating. In animal production, there are different mating systems that can be used. This is a mating system where the male is allowed to stay with the female and mate without assistance or interference from the attendant or the stockman. Fun fact, during natural mating in cattle, several billion sperms are deposited into the anterior vagina, with less than 1% of the population reaching the uterine body. Compared to standard artificial insemination, an inflexible catheter bypasses the cervix, allowing a much smaller number of sperm to be deposited in the uterine body.
Another mating system known to stockmen is called the controlled mating. This is a mating where particular bulls are assigned to mate particular cows in a pen or in an enclosure. This system is used where breeding records are important and are taken. Controlled mating makes it easier for unproductive animals to be identified and culled. It is a useful tool to maximize production while matching grazing pressure to carrying capacity, which leads to healthier and more productive pastures, better ground cover, reduced sediment loss, and better water quality.
There are two types of controlled mating, namely the synchronization and the artificial insemination or AI. In the synchronization type, the estrus of the cow is synchronized such that all come on heat about the same time. Here is a video clip on how synchronization occurs in the cattle farms. In this situation, the CRDR is inserted in the cow's vagina, where it releases the hormone progesterone. CRDRs or controlled internal drug release are a common estrous synchronization tool, but they can also be used to bring cows into heat before they would normally come into heat on their own. Progesterone can be given in the natural or synthetic form. Both can be used to synchronize estrus in cow. When the female ovulates, the site of ovulation develops a structure known as corpus hemorrhagicum, which quickly, within 4 to 7 days, develops into a corpus luteum.
Commonly, in synchronization synthetic sex hormones such as estrogen that comes under different names are either injected or implanted through the vagina or the ear on the cow or heifer. This causes animals to come in heat about the same time, hence they could be mated either by the use of artificial insemination or bull at the same time. The advantage is that it allows for easy management of the cows and their offspring, especially if there is a loss of them at calving, hence the calf could be fostered.
Another form of controlled mating is the process of collecting semen with living sperm from proven bull using dummy female or vagina, and the timely introduction of sperm to the reproductive tract of a ready female. This is called artificial insemination. Here's a step-by-step tutorial on how it is done.
Today we're going to go through a step-by-step process on how to AI. Make sure your wrists and fingers are free of any jewelry, watches, or hair ties. Use an OB sleeve on your palpating hand. Most technicians prefer to use their non-dominant hand. Some technicians prefer to use an additional glove on the outside of the sleeve. Apply lube. Keep the loaded catheter warm and protected, either using an AI gun warmer or tucking it into your shirt until you are ready to AI. It is important to keep the tip of the catheter as clean as possible in order to avoid introducing bacteria into the uterus. Point your fingertips to your thumb and insert your palpating hand into the rectum. Wipe the vulva of any manure in order to avoid bringing in infectious bacteria. Making a fist and applying downward pressure will cause the vulva to slightly open, allowing a clean entrance. Insert the catheter into the vulva at a slight upward angle to avoid the urethra. Begin to level out the angle of the catheter as you gently push the catheter forward into the tract. If you feel resistance at this stage and the gun is not proceeding easily, the catheter is probably caught in a vaginal fold. You will likely need to take a firm hold of the cervix and actually push it forward within the animal. Gently readjust the depth and direction of the catheter with your free hand until you can easily guide it further into the tract. It is possible your catheter will already be in contact with the cervix, but if not, palpate the tract and find the cervix. The cervix will vary in size and shape, but all have a distinct turkey neck feel. When you have brought the tip of your catheter close to the cervix, the next step is to insert the tip of the catheter into the opening of the cervix. This can be challenging. Around the cervix, the vagina forms a blind-ended pocket called the fornix. It is very easy for the tip of the gun to simply be in this pocket rather than at the opening of the cervix. The fornix tends to stretch, so the catheter could appear to be advancing forward, but really could be above, below, or to the side of the cervix. Clamping down around the vaginal end of the cervix, you can close off the fornix and guide the AI gun straight to the entrance of the cervix. You will feel a scratching or dragging sensation to the catheter once the tip is at the entrance to the cervix. Once in the cervix, you will need to pass the catheter through the annular rings. It will generally feel as though there are 3 to 4 rings. In some animals, this can be very challenging. The cervix is a tough structure and may require a lot of manipulation. After passing one ring, maintain light forward pressure on the catheter with your free hand while you turn and angle the cervix to find the opening to the next ring. The key concept is to work the cervix back onto the gun with your palpating hand rather than pushing the gun in with your free hand. To ensure you are in the correct spot, feel for the tip of your gun. If you are still in the cervix, you will not be able to feel the tip of your catheter very well. Since the uterus is much thinner, you will be able to feel the tip of your gun in the uterine body. You want to clearly feel a ½ inch to an inch of catheter in the body of the uterus. Avoid pushing the catheter farther into the uterus and down a uterine horn. We want to minimize any potential for irritation within the uterus. Keep the catheter in the same place, making sure not to pull back into the cervix until semen has been deposited.
Artificial insemination is not merely a novel method of bringing about impregnation in females. Instead, it is a powerful tool mostly employed for livestock improvement.
This has been found to result in a normal offspring. In this process, the semen is inseminated into the female by placing a portion of it either in a collected or diluted forms into the cervix or uterus by mechanical methods at the proper time and under most hygienic conditions. In artificial insemination, the germplasm of the bull of superior quality can be effectively utilized with the least regard of their location in faraway places. The only problem with the system is that of heat detection. However, the adoption of artificial insemination, there would be considerable reduction in both genital and non-genital diseases in the farm stock.
Now that we're done with the breeding, we will now talk about the management of the pregnant cow. Even though the parturition is a normal physiological process, It requires to take due care of the cow or heifer even before it occurs, and all stages of the parturition by the manager of the herd. The gestation period in cow is 272 to 292 days with an average of 283 days. Immediately the cow becomes pregnant, it must be separated if it is a farm where separate pens are available for pregnant or in cows. Otherwise, it must be kept under the watchful eye of the attendant to prevent fighting or any actions that can lead to abortion. The cow is confirmed pregnant if it does not return to estrus when introduced to male, it will refuse mounting.
In some developed countries, ultrasound is used to detect pregnancy, and a technician can recognize a 25 to 30-day pregnancy. Other means of detecting and confirming pregnancy include rectal palpation could be carried out about the 5th week after mating through the genital organ of the cow. The trained technician or a veterinarian wears a glove and inserts his or her hand into the genitals through the rectum of the cow and gently palpate or feel the development of the fetus.
Also, hormonal changes in the animal system can also be monitored. Observation of the physical behavioral changes of the cow as it begins to undergo conformational changes around the belly and loin area. Adequate feeding, good healthcare, and gentle handling must be given to the cow at the first trimester of pregnancy to prevent abortion. A good combination of good quality succulent grass and legumes must be provided with substantial supply of water. Slippery floor must be avoided to prevent falling and dislocation. Drought must not be allowed in the stall or pen, and adequate ventilation ensured. Pregnant cows must not be allowed to walk long distances to prevent stress that may lead to abortion. Towards parturition, the in-cow must be well monitored. A maternity pen must be washed. Disinfected well-bedded must be prepared for calving.
At about 272 days of pregnancy, an in-cow is about to calve. It must be taken to the calving and maternity pen for some days to end of pregnancy, which can be calculated from the records kept by the stockman. If calving must be done on pasture, a clean, quiet, secluded place must be prepared for it while the stockman watches in case assistance is required. Towards calving, the udder becomes bigger, the vulva also swells, and the ligaments around the tailhead drops. Hormones such as oxytocin are released, which helps in the contraction of the uterus. The amniotic fluid is released and the animal pushes for the fetus to be expelled. Normally, the fetus comes out with the head laid over the forelegs for ease of passage. After this, the placenta is expelled and buried. The cow must not be allowed to eat it. If the placenta does not come out between 5 to 8 hours of calving, or fetus comes with wrong presentation, the assistance of veterinarian must be sought.
In this part of the world, the cow licks the calf immediately after calving to stimulate the lungs to respiratory action, whereas in the advanced world, this trait has been bred out from the animals. The cow must be cleaned up by washing the vulva and the calf separated from the mother where such facilities exist as in dairy farms, or the calf is allowed to run with the dam. Soon after birth, calves must be identified by tagging, tattooing, branding, or ear notching.
All calves must receive adequate fresh colostrum within the first 12 hours of life and should be fed colostrum or a colostrum substitute for at least the first 4 days of life. After parturition, the calf may be reared on 2 basic systems.
The 2 systems are called natural and artificial rearing. Under the natural rearing, the calf is allowed to run with the dam, thereby having a limited access to mother's milk. This is called a cow and calf system or single suckling system. If the dam has foster calf, it is called nurse cow method or multiple suckling. The first milk or colostrum is of importance because it helps transfer immunity of the mother to the calf at birth. In this situation, the calf stays with the dam for not less than a period of about 6 months or about 9 months in some traditional system. Calves reared this way are always very strong and grow more rapidly.
Under artificial rearing, the calf is fed on milk replacers, while it is also allowed restricted access to the milk of the dam. Usually, the calf is bucket fed to milk, or through a nipple drinker. The calf must be trained for this. At about the 3rd week of life, the calf is introduced to solid food and good quality forage. The rule of maintaining good hygiene is very essential in this method. Calves raised under this system are usually kept in there until about 6 months of age before turning them to pasture.
Artificial rearing of calves is mostly practiced in dairy cattle production, while natural one is popular with beef cattle production. Calves must be debudded and unwanted males castrated, and they should be completely weaned from liquid diet, as from the 16th week of life.
In conclusion, cattle have contributed to the survival of humans for many thousands of years, initially as animals. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors pursued for food, tools, and leather, and which farmers raised for the past 10,000 years or so as livestock for meat, milk, and as draft animals.
From an environmental standpoint, cattle play an irreplaceable role in maintaining topsoil, promoting biodiversity, protecting wildlife habitat, reducing the spread of wildfires, providing natural fertilizers, and so much more. Bovines are associated with human survival, and vice versa.
We have depended on them for food labor and security. Every animal needs to be taken good care of, given food, shelter, and veterinary care. This way, humans show commitment towards animals. Improving their life means improving the life of the human race too. It is only right and important that we know how to properly manage and take care of them. For animals to have respect for humans, we must also do the same to them.